Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. There was a quote I just read from the major writings of Nichiren, where he says, in the true aspect of the object of devotion, in other words, the Gohonzon, that we should never seek the Gohonzon outside ourselves, that the Gohonzon is the state of our own Buddhahood, our Buddha mind. So every now and again I hear comments from people of certain sectarian cults that, though I laud them as fellow Buddhist practitioners, have been given the misinformation that this Gohonzon, the paper, the scroll, is some sanctified object that can only be bestowed in a certain way by certain people in certain places. I really want those who think that way to reflect on what Nichiren himself instructed about the Gohonzon, its meaning, and where it resides. And I also would like you to reflect on the Shakyamuni Buddha's own teachings, that this is a universal teaching that is to save all beings, living beings. This isn't a sectarian question. This isn't see, it's hard to understand democratically how this Gohonzon is available to everyone, because, as Nichiren said, it's not outside the self. It's in us. This life, this earthly life we live, is Gohonzon. It is Buddhahood. We just have all these veils of attachments and desires, and we think if we belong to this group or that group, we're more special than the other group, and so on and so forth. It's so samsaric. It's so deluded. Please, please, all of you, at least those of you who are participating and listening to my videos, understand that although this is an amazing object, that when Nichiren and Buddha talk about object, they're really talking about a verb. They're talking more of an objective, of unearthing something that's already there that we just fail to recognize or experience, and that is our Buddha mind, our perspective, our attitude. And as feeble humans, well, I shouldn't say feeble, but as deluded, as samsarically conditioned minds, we're desperately attached to duality, to other. So the scroll Gohonzon is a device. Remember, skillful means, skillful device, expedient devices, whatever you want to translate it as. It's a skillful device for our human mind to be occupied visually as we focus and we chant to it, in order to occupy that din of activity that is our human samsaric mind, so that beneath it we can reveal our Buddha mind, which is what this device represents. It isn't in itself something we worship. We don't worship a scroll. We don't worship a piece of paper. We don't even worship the writing up there. We worship what it represents, which is in us already. This is why Nichiren calls it a mirror. When you go in the bathroom and you look in your mirror, or your dressing room, or wherever your mirror is, when you look in a mirror, do you see you? No. We all know that it's a reflection, a reversed reflection, but nonetheless a reflection of this flesh and body, right? We know that. This is what the Gohonzon is. It's just a reflector. That is not it. So the idea that it can only be given in certain ways and certain, come on, that's total cult talk. And that is, more importantly, to miss the entire lesson of Buddhism. So yes, I make the Gohonzon available through my website. I make it available through online printers. I research tremendously to find accurate digital representations of actual Gohonzons inscribed by Nichiren himself. So this is a digital copy representation of an actual Sumi inked Gohonzon by the hand of Nichiren, not some tertiary priest, not some 26th priest of a certain sect, not that by the hand of another, but the actual hand of Nichiren. So I feel closest to Nichiren's teachings through this forensic, if you will, historical Gohonzon. But I don't feel closer to Nichiren. I feel closer through his teaching and his hand and his creation of this magnificent mirror to my own Buddha mind. Nobody's in my way of that. My Buddha mind is mine. Nobody's going to get in my way. Do you get it? So this veneration of a physical object is a total samsaric delusion. This is a device. The clearer and more concise and more direct translation of that device I can have, the clearer my mirror. That's certainly the way I see it. But the Gohonzon isn't behind me sitting on the wall, well lit. The Gohonzon is in me, it's in you. Because it represents every aspect of our living life Buddha mind. All right, I've said enough on that. It's an interesting introduction and an interesting question, I guess, that I've felt compelled to talk about as we enter the 11th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, because in this translation, the title is The Site of the Treasure Stupa. Remember in chapter 10, we talked about the treasure stupa. Let's see what it's called in the old 19th century translation. Still on chapter 10 here. Chapter 11, Apparition of a Stupa. I like the word apparition because once again it points out that all of these sermons are about mental perception, not actual physical things. And let's see, in this very popular translation, Teacher of Law, beholding the precious stupa. So there's a lot of different ways of saying the same thing, and I'm going to add another one, but I'm not going to make it a title. One of the very fundamental things, and in this chapter you may start to wander mentally because there's a lot of hyperbole and um, a lot of language, as there is throughout all of the sermons, not just the Lotus, um, about the incalculable distant past or future, this whole thing with time. This is going to really get nailed down in the second half of the Lotus Sutra, specifically the 16th chapter, the lifespan of the Tathagata. But I don't want to jump too far ahead. It really, the whole time span thing is about uh, trying to get out of this immediacy, not of the moment, because that's what we want, but of this perception, this samsaric perception of time, of the idea that everything is happening, is brand new, that it's never been discovered before, this kind of thing. A lot of what Shakyamuni is trying to teach us is that this is tied to our duality of things. We seem to think that we're the discoverers and the makers of new things, but there really is nothing new. There's nothing old. This is part of the distinctions of the human mind and the trick of time, right? So, in the 11th chapter, I'm going to get right to it. Um, there are three important things I've noted to myself here to remind you of. The treasure stupa that he's describing, him sitting next to Tahoe Buddha, or the Buddha of abundant treasures, um, Nichiren really exploited the visual aspect of this sermon, and this is a chapter you can see directly affected his whole layout and design for that scroll, the envisioning of this precious stupa. So now we get a little bit more concrete idea of what the Gohonzon is represented to discuss, to mean, to the reflection. And it's another reminder that this sermon is a discussion of attitude in our minds, our Buddha mind. So Nichiren endeavors to draw a picture of what Shakyamuni is discussing throughout the Lotus Sutra. And in this chapter, the sight of the treasure stupa, the apparition of the stupa, is a lengthy description about how he and the other Buddha are arranged in the middle of the tower, and additionally, the whole of this, as we began, the whole of this sermon is somehow elevated. And think about that too, the meaning, the auspices of he and all of these disciples in all directions, all of us are actually, we leave the ground and we elevate, and this often called the ceremony in the air, right? At Vulture Peak or Eagle Peak. This is also represented diagrammatically in the Gohonzon. The main subject, if you will, is in the center. It's not on the left column or the right column or formal writing so much as it is a diagrammatic representation. Namu Myoho Renge-kyo is in the center. Why? Because it is the treasure tower. It is the precious stupa. And on its sides are the Buddhas and the four bodhisattvas surrounding it to a protection of sorts. There's a representation of all the main concepts of Shakyamuni's teachings altogether, which are brought about again in the Lotus Sutra. So the Gohonzon isn't just some randomly designed thing. In fact, if you research it, you'll find there are 125 extant copies of Gohonzons that were created by hand by Nichiren, and they're all different. because the early ones were for specific individuals and things they needed to karmically focus on. And then there's a slow development until finally, in his later years, he realizes that he can make a Gohonzon that reflects the entirety of what Shakyamuni is diagrammatically speaking about, that will work for all people, which was Shakyamuni's goal from the first place, right? So this is why we use this Gohonzon, and this chapter illustrates, if not the entire Gohonzon, a very strong imagery of Nichiren's inspiration for this diagrammatic Gohonzon. So let's get into it. Oh, another thing that's very important about this chapter is he once again, Shakyamuni, emphasizes the enlightenment of women. You know, Shakyamuni was persecuted many times in his life, not least of which for the ideas that he was promoting, being, you could say revolutionary, but outright affronts to the powers of the culture at his time. Think about it. Even in today's India, women are generally treated very, very poorly. And add to that the still extant caste system, where some women are just throwaways. They pile them up on the side of the road and burn them. It's disgusting the way they treat women in the caste system. I mean, India is not the only culture that does that. There are many. But my point is that for Shakyamuni Buddha to teach and promote that women also can awaken to the Buddha mind. Oh, whoa! Talk about egalitarian. He pissed off a lot of powerful people in his day saying things like this. He even, in fact, that was so powerful a statement that he confused a lot of his own students. They couldn't accept that. So think about that. Think about the courage. But again, Shakyamuni was looking for the truth, not a truth. Not if you wear these clothes or go to this club truth. Right? I mean, this is the main reason one of the core reasons I practice Buddhism is because of its deep, unshakable reality, real, fundamental truth. I mean, I was a scientist. I still consider myself a scientist, but I'm not in the industry. And science has yet to catch up with Shakyamuni. Anyway, at that time, a stupa of 7 precious materials, 500 leagues high and 250 leagues wide and deep, sprang up from the earth in front of the Buddha and stood in the air. Come on. 7 precious materials? Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Sprung up from the earth? None other than we are stardust, we are golden. It's us. It's the entire universe. It's not some other thing from some other universe, planet, sky, heaven. It's just us. It's just this earth. It's just real plain, simple there. But in order for us to revere, respect it, and then be awed by it, it comes from the earth and raises into the air. Just like we push away the defilements of dirt, rock, stone, whatever, so that we can perceive and be enlightened to our Buddha mind. The symbolism in every word of his sermons is incredible. And no matter how it's translated, this message comes through. It was decorated with all kinds of valuable things. It had 5,000 railings, 10 millions of niche-like spaces, open to the outside, and was decorated with countless banners and this is just to again inculcate the preciousness, the amazing nature of awakening, right? From its four sides came the fragrance of Tamlapatra sandalwood, filling the whole world. Right? The world is all our perception, right? All its banners and canopies were composed of 7 precious materials, gold, silver, leather, so on and so forth. It was so tall it reached up to the places of the 4 kings of heaven. The 33 gods rained down mandarava flowers from heaven as offerings to the treasure stupa. Other gods, dragons, satyrs, centaurs, here we go, this hyperbole, right? But it's all not just it's all colorful in order to raise your spirit, to raise your mind to the unfathomable and amazing nature of awakening to the Buddha mind, right? Then from the midst of the treasure stupa came a loud voice of praise saying, well done, world-honored Shakyamuni. For the sake of the great assembly, you are able to teach the wonderful Dharma Flower Sutra. You are able to teach the Myoho Renge Kyo. I mean, I'm not making this up. I'm just saying the translation can get in your way of understanding what he's actually saying here. The voice from the treasure stupa is teaching Myoho Renge Kyo. So obviously, this is why Nichiren put Namu Myoho Renge Kyo right in the middle. That's what the treasure stupa is all about. And it's a treasure. Why? Because it's inside of us, not on this piece of paper. But this piece of paper is a perfect mirror. Right? How often have you read that in Nichiren? Great impartial wisdom, the Dharma by which bodhisattvas are taught and which Buddhas protect and keep in mind. It is just as you say, world-honored Shakyamuni. All that you say is true. Then the 4 groups, seeing the great treasure stupa in the air and hearing the voice that came from the stupa, were filled with joy in the Dharma and with wonder at these unprecedented things. They got up from their seats and reverently put their palms together, withdrew to one side. Meanwhile, a bodhisattva great one named Great Delight in Preaching, right? We just talked about the benefits of preaching. Perceiving uncertainty in the minds of the human and heavenly beings, Asuras and others of the worlds, of all the worlds, spoke to the Buddha saying, world-honored one, for what reason has this treasure stupa sprung out of the earth and this voice come from within it? Why do we need a Gohonzon? Then the Buddha told Great Delight in Preaching Bodhisattva, in this treasure stupa there is the whole body of the Tathagata. You see, I'm not making this stuff up. Come on now. Once in the past, innumerable tens of millions of billions of countless worlds to the east, in a land named Treasure Purity, there was a Buddha named Abundant Treasures. When that Buddha was originally practicing the Bodhisattva way, he made a great vow saying, after I become a Buddha and then extinct, if there is a place in any land in the universe where the Dharma Flower Sutra, the Myoho Renge Kyo, is taught, in order that I may listen to it, my stupa will appear there, bearing testimony to the sutra and praising it, saying, well done. When that Buddha had finished the Buddha way, his extinction approaching, in the midst of a great assembly of human and heavenly beings, he said to the monks, after my extinction, if anyone wants to make offerings to my whole body, they should put up a great stupa. Thus, throughout all the worlds of the universe, in any place at all where someone teaches the Myoho Renge Kyo, by his divine powers, the power of his vow, that Buddha has his treasure stupa containing his whole body appear before them and praise the sutra, saying, well done, well done. This is the play on the duality, right? Great delight in preaching, it is because just now the Tathagata abundant treasures heard the Myoho Renge Kyo being taught, that his stupa sprang up from the earth, bearing praise and saying, well done, well done. Then great delight in preaching Bodhisattva, because of the divine powers of Tathagata, said to the Buddha, world honored one, we want to see this Buddha's body. It just can't let go of this duality, right? What proof? The Buddha said to great delight in preaching Bodhisattva, the great one, this Buddha abundant treasures has taken a profound vow, saying, when my treasure stupa appears in the presence of one of the Buddhas, so that I can hear the Myoho Renge Kyo, if someone wants me to show my body to the four groups, let the Buddhas who are embodiments of that Buddha and are preaching the Dharma in the worlds of the 10 directions return together and assemble in one place. Then my body will appear. Thus great delight in preaching, I must now assemble the Buddhas who are my embodiments and are preaching the Dharma in all the worlds. This is a huge clue. And I suppose, in a way, as you read the chapters of the Lotus Sutra, it seems like his students were really, really slow to grasp what he was saying, because there's this re-entry into saying the same thing from different paths, innumerable paths, as we've already heard. Really the same thing. He just transgressed in the what we would say grammatically in the text, in that he's saying that abundant treasures Buddha talked about his, what's the word he used? Embodiments. And in the next sentence, or a couple sentences later, he says, I must now assemble the Buddhas who are my embodiments and are preaching the Dharma in all the worlds. Now, all of this paragraph is really saying the same thing, that this idea of multiple Buddhas throughout time, past, present, and future, is a delusion, because they're all Shakyamuni. Actually, Shakyamuni is a delusion. They're all Buddha. And that Buddha is your Buddha mind, my Buddha mind, their Buddha mind. It is the Buddha mind. Period. There is no time aspect to it. It just is. It's a perceptive view, attitude of the process of all phenomena. All right, that might be confusing. We'll get back to it, because he keeps returning to it constantly throughout the Lotus Sutra. Great delight in preaching, replied to the Buddha, world honored one. We would also like to see the Buddhas who embody you and worship and make offerings to them. Duh. Isn't that what he just said? All right, Bodhisattva, great delight. Then the Buddha emitted a beam of light from the tuft of white hair, immediately making visible all the Buddhas in 5,000,000 billion myriads of lands to the east, as many as the sands of the Ganges, the hyperbole. All those lands had, and I'm sorry, it may sound like I'm discounting the hyperbole, but please understand, I'm trying to point out as I read through this that this device that he continually uses is to try to rein in the imagination of everyone that's listening to him so they can become present in this moment. Okay? All those lands, and I'm assuming that you, being a modern human, get that. So I don't have to go into all the hyperbole. You get what's happening here. All those lands and had crystal for their ground, so on and so forth. They were filled with countless tens of millions of billions of bodhisattvas, all humanity. Jeweled awnings were hung there, and nets of jewels were overhead. All the Buddhas in those lands preached various teachings with great, wonderful voices, and innumerable tens of millions of billions of bodhisattvas were also seen there, filling those lands and teaching the Dharma for the multitude. It was the same in the southern, western, northern, so on and so forth. Then each of the Buddhas in the 10 directions spoke to his multitudes of bodhisattvas, saying, "Good sons, now we have to go to Shakyamuni Buddha's world and make offerings to the treasure stupa of the Tathagata abundant treasures." Shakyamuni is the Tathagata abundant treasures. Then this world instantly became pure, with lapis lazuli for earth, jeweled trees adorning it, the cords of this magnificent imagery. If you could even begin to fathom what this would actually look like, if it, with 3D software and movie making magic that we have now, we could actually construct this place, right? Like a gaming environment, just really blow us away, right? Although in this age of defilement, it takes a lot to impress us, doesn't it? So at least try to appreciate that this is what the hyperbole is about. It's about trying to expand your mind's imagination to the greatness, the depth, the unimaginable wealth of this teaching. Whatever that is for you, use your own hyperbole, use your own imagination to create this world beyond what you've experienced. Then those Buddhas, each bringing a great bodhisattva as his attendant, arrived at this world and went to the foot of the jewel tree. Each of the jewel trees was 500 leagues high, adorned with branches, leaves, flowers, so on and so forth, under those trees. Then the Buddhas went to those seats and sat cross-legged on them. Thus the 3,000 great thousandfold world was being filled, though those embodying Shakyamuni Buddha had not yet finished arriving from even one direction. So these are all embodiments of Shakyamuni Buddha. And as grandiose as this example is, they're not even done coming from one direction. In other words, the presence of Buddha, Buddha mind, Buddha, Shakyamuni, in this case named because he's in a physical instantiation, but Buddha. It's not about the man, it's about the Buddha, mind. It's limitless. It has no time. You can go back through history as far back before the Big Bang. All right? Let's use some modern terminology. Before the Big Bang and long after the universe is extinct, if ever. Whatever that time represents to you, they're all embodiments of Buddha. Why? Because we're embodiments of Buddha. The universe is an embodiment of Buddha. The Buddha mind is the process of all things. Then Shakyamuni Buddha, wanting to make room for all the Buddhas who embodied him, transformed 2,000,000 billion myriads of lands in each of the 8 directions, making them pure without purgatories, hungry spirits, animals, or asuras. What's more, he removed their human and heavenly beings to other lands. The lands thus transformed also had lapis lazuli for earth and were adorned by jewel trees 500 leagues high and with branches, leaves, blah, 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 blah. There were no large seas or rivers or any mountains, kings such as Mount Musalinda, Mount Great, on and on. The whole area made up a single Buddha land. There's that simile again, Buddha land. Its jeweled ground was even and smooth. Jewel-decked awnings were spread and streamed. I mean, how could anybody at this sermon actually see a concrete version of what he's talking about? It can only happen in the mind. This, obviously, there's no way you could see all of this. And here he is diligently trying to simplify something that's so immeasurable and incalculable that you can't even fathom it, right? But you're supposed to see it in front of you and experience it? No, you're experiencing it in your mind. In order that the Buddhas who were arriving might be seated, Shakyamuni Buddha once again transformed 2,000,000 billion myriads of lands in each of the 8 directions, making them pure with, again, okay, under every tree was a jeweled lion seat, 5 leagues high, decorated with great jewels. There were no large seas or rivers. Why? Because seas or rivers, a bunch of water. We don't need that taking up space in our discussion. Everywhere, jewel-decked awnings were spread in streamers and canopies. At that moment, those embodying Shakyamuni to the east, Buddhas who preached the Dharma in hundreds of thousands of billions of myriads of lands as numerous as the sands of the Ganges, arrived at and assembled. In the same way, all the Buddhas from the 10 directions gradually arrived and assembled and took their seats in the 8 directions. Then each direction was filled with Buddha Tathagatas from 4,000,000 billion myriads of lands. It's big. I mean, he's being asked repetitively by his students to prove stuff. So his examples just keep getting huger and huger because he's trying to overwhelm their doubts and you know, basically saying, okay, is that enough? Right? All right. Then Shakyamuni Buddha, seeing the Buddhas who embodied him assembled together, each seated on a lion's seat, and hearing that those Buddhas all wanted the treasure stupa to be opened, immediately got up from his seat, went up into the air. All 4 groups stood up, put their palms together, and gazed at the Buddha in rapt attention. I would think so. Then Shakyamuni Buddha opened the door of the stupa of the 7 precious materials with the fingers of his right hand. From the stupa there came a great sound, like the withdrawing of the bar when the gate to the great city is opened. Suddenly the whole congregation saw the Tathagata abundant treasures on a lion's seat in the treasure stupa with his whole body in one piece, sitting as though he were in meditation. And they heard him say, well done, Shakyamuni Buddha. You have preached this Myoho Renge Kyo gladly, which is what I have come to this place to hear. So this is the stupa, Gohonzon, the stupa, which is here to hear, not to give it to you, but to hear. What's it going to hear? It's going to hear the teaching. What is the teaching? Myoho Renge Kyo. We chant Myoho Renge Kyo to the great stupa so it can hear and mirror perfectly our Buddha mind. All of this imagery is really, really elaborate, but the message is so clear and simple, right? Then the four groups, seeing the Buddha had passed away and had been extinct for innumerable tens of millions of billions of eons, speak such words as these, praising such an unprecedented event, scattered heaps of precious flowers from heaven on abundant treasures Buddha and on Shakyamuni Buddha. Abundant treasures Buddha offered half his seat within the treasure stupa to Shakyamuni Buddha, saying, Shakyamuni Buddha, take this seat. Then Shakyamuni Buddha entered the stupa, took half the seat, and sat with folded legs. Seeing the two Tathagatas sitting with folded legs on the lion seat in the stupa, the seven precious materials, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, those in the great assembly then thought, the Buddhas are sitting high and far away. It would be good if the Tathagatas would use their divine powers to enable all of us to be up in the air. Immediately, Shakyamuni Buddha used his divine powers to bring all of the great assembly to where he was up in the air. In a loud voice, he addressed all four groups, saying, who is able to teach the Myoho Renge Kyo everywhere throughout this world? Now indeed is the time. Before long, the Tathagata will enter nirvana so that it will last forever. The Buddha wants to entrust this Myoho Renge Kyo to someone. This is the imagery of the Gohonzon. The two Buddhas are seated, can I do this? Right up there next to Namu Myoho. This, and of course, then they go into verse. This holy Lord, world-honored one, though long extinct, sits in his treasure stupa and comes here for the sake of the Dharma. I'm going to go through the whole thing again because you understand the meaning. So this is what I started out by saying, is that this chapter really, and I think you should read the prose, really goes into the meaning that Nichiren devised this skillful device of the Gohonzon to capture this very essence of what Shakyamuni was teaching people about time and timelessness and the irrelevance of multitudes as the one teaching, the Myoho Renge Kyo. One who is able to keep this sutra dharma has already made great offerings. Anyone who teaches this sutra will be able to see and the Tathagata abundant treasures and also the Buddhas embodying me. All my good sons should carefully consider this. This is a difficult task requiring the making of a great vow. In other words, you have to be determined. You have to use your conviction, your strong mind, so that when you chant, your focus is single-minded, and your Buddha mind will open up. It will awaken. With this perfect mirror, this is the ultimate device. This is the power of the Lotus Sutra and Nichiren's specific teaching. With this mirror, we cannot avoid enlightenment. It's in your face. It's a reflection of your enlightenment. Just be determined. If someone took the whole earth, put it on his or her toenail, and ascended to the Brahma heaven, that would not be difficult. Like threading a camel through the hole of a needle, right? But after the Buddha's extinction in the midst of an evil age, if someone reads this sutra aloud for even a moment, this indeed will be difficult. In the fire of the eon's end, if someone carried a load of dry hay into the fire without getting burned, that would not be difficult. But after my extinction, if anyone embraces this sutra and teaches it to even one person, this indeed will be difficult. If one embraced the storehouse of 84,000 teachings and the 12 divisions of the sutras and preached them to others, leading those who hear to gain the 6 divine powers, even if one could do all this, that would not be difficult. But after my extinction, if anyone hears and accepts this sutra and inquires about its meaning, this indeed will be difficult. So he recognizes that this is going to take effort. It's not just going to happen by waiting for it. In the future, someone who can read and embrace this sutra will truly be a child of the Buddha, living in a land that is pure and good. After the Buddha's extinction, one who can understand its meaning will be the eyes of the world for both human and heavenly beings. In that frightening age, one who can teach this sutra even for a moment should receive offerings from all human and heavenly beings. And I think in my in my desire to read ahead so that I could be imbued with some wisdom as I talk about these chapters, I think I jumped ahead to the next chapter, chapter 12, the Devadatta's chapter, in which his mother or his aunt, one of the women in Shakyamuni's life, asks for assurance. You know, this is happening constantly. And this is where the enlightenment of women happens. So I apologize for leading you to think that that was in chapter 11. I think it's in the following chapter. But with that, got a nice long video here on chapter 11. So I'm going to close this lesson on chapter 11, and we will look forward to the Devadatta chapter 12. That's it for 11. I hope you got something out of this. I hope it inspires you to chant and get a Gohonzon. You don't need to wait. I encourage you to do that as soon as possible. It's a tremendous tool to make effective your chanting. You'll feel it immediately. Thank you so much for listening. I sure appreciate your participation, your support. To me, it is the greatest reward. So we'll close with Daimoku Sancho. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you. Until next time, be Buddha. Be, as I say, be the Myo. Thanks again.